This is F.D.Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D.Recovery. This is the weekly intention portion of the podcast. And with me I have...
Shelly.
We have Shelly. So, last week was, refresh my memory, was it love? I think it was love.
It was love.
Okay. So this week will be followed by anger.
Ooh, you're an expert.
Yes, I am. You don't get mandated for anger management classes for nothing. I think it was like 3 or 4 or something like that. So we'll do a slight little recap on love and how it worked for us in our recovery, and then we'll move on to the topic of anger. And for the newbies out there, what we do is we take a topic, our spiritual principle, and we work it in our day-to-day lives, week to week. And they change topic week to week, and then we come back and do a recap and so on and so forth. So, love, all right? Love, that's a difficult one, all right? I've always struggled with it, and we talked a little bit last week, and it's not an easy topic for people to just talk about, right? And I shared a little bit at the meeting at recovery home, and as soon as I said love, everybody's like, you can like all the air got sucked out of the room, and then like, what the heck? And it's funny because you talk about those coping mechanisms, right? And before we got on, you mentioned coping mechanisms, and
Sure did.
And their coping mechanism was to start cracking jokes, right? Because it got uncomfortable, because that's an uncomfortable topic for especially men, right? Anyone, but especially men. So getting in there's a certain camaraderie of, what it could be as far as a group of men around each other. And
You should try love out as a woman.
Love out as a woman?
Yeah, you said love is especially hard for men, but you've never been a woman.
No, yeah, exactly. That's why I said that. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a woman, so I leave that up for you. So, but yeah, that topic, it can get a little tricky for anybody, but especially coming from the life that we've lived in alcoholism and being addicts, it has a special little kicker for some of us, because we come from a whole lot of broken homes, broken relationships. A lot of it's self-induced, but some of it, at least at the younger stages of our lives, wasn't, right? We had no control over a lot of that stuff. And so we all come from different walks of life with trauma and things like that. And it can get pretty sticky. And the conversation of love, it can, at least the way I notice it when I brought it up in meetings and stuff like that, and in my day-to-day, it's pretty tricky, right? It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. They don't, and the topic was more or less self-love in that particular meeting. And, that was even more difficult, right? It's easy to jump and say, I love this, I love that, I love lamp. But, when you get down to like talking about yourself and the things you like about yourself, and start listing off some of the assets and all these positive stuff, it gets a little tricky, because we go, at least for me and a lot of us in recovery, we kind of sulk in all that negativity for so long, and we don't really see the light a lot of the times when we're out there. And especially a place like rehab, it's a different type, right? We sit here with a little bit more clean time, thankfully, gratefully, right? But being in rehab, I remember what it's like. It's a whole different world. Everything's a little bit more sketchy. Your brain's a little bit more fried, and you're really just, it's a safe haven to try to find that equilibrium, and it's a real hectic time, especially for us alcoholics, addicts, right? And it's just interesting to bring up that topic, especially in there, and just kind of see what's on their heart. And it was pretty cool to watch it unfold, because people just, being that vulnerable and that raw, and then just getting to a place where people can communicate that, jokes aside, they got really deep, right? And it was just a cool experience to watch them allow them to, to speak, and then vice versa. And it was just kind of cool to watch how it unfolded, and you know, and it's a strong reminder, especially, sometimes we can get some clean time and we can forget what it's like, right? And understanding that people, like newcomers, or just whether you're in rehab or wherever you're coming from, whether you're fresh into a meeting as a newcomer, it's a little tricky. And just keeping that in mind when you're dealing with newcomers and giving them that grace period. It's like, man, when I deal with them every single Friday, right? So I have a constant reminder of what it looks like, and what kind of pain they're going through. And I call it, how do you say it, with one of those reminders that are almost painful to watch, right? But in a sense, you're very grateful, like, because here I am, is I can spread, some of what I got to give, and hopefully it hits one of them. And it does. It's a very small percentage, because our odds are not very great, right? That's just kind of, if anybody's been in long-term sobriety, we know how the odds can be. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of addicts and alcoholics that go through the rooms, and of just even a small group, and sometimes we just don't ever see them again. Either they die, they succumb to the alcoholism and addiction, OD. There's just a lot of stuff going on for us, right? And I think that, having that love piece in the whole experience, it kind of softens the heart. And a big thing for me this week was just trying to live in acceptance, because I know that for me, a big part of getting to that road of love is, really finding those acceptance pieces, right? Because that's the way it worked for me, right? How about you? How did old lovey dove?
It wasn't anything different than any other week, just learning to be a little more kind to myself and be more self aware of that. I like that you mentioned being raw and vulnerable and seeing those people in those very, very early days of their, sobriety and their clean time. It's hard. You're coming out of a place of complete skewed. Uh, mm, you're just coming from a skewed place. So the image that you have of yourself usually isn't a reality. So when you start to detox and clear up that fog that's been in your mind for so long, for so many, recognizing the person that you are is really hard. At least for me, it was, and still can be, the decisions that I've made and this, that, and the other thing. But when you're going through that detox and getting all of that stuff out of you, and that fog is lifting, that veil is lifting, you have this hard truth that you've become this person that a lot of people, that you're there for a reason. You don't want to be that awful drug addicted, alcohol addicted person. And to see yourself in that way makes it really hard to love yourself, because you have to look past through all the hurt and the damage that you've done and be in acceptance of it and be, okay, well, this is where I'm at. This is what happened. And learning to love yourself, but also to be open to the love around you. The people that are coming into the recovery homes, they're there for a reason themselves. Just because they may look good, they may talk good, but they have a story that, could be very similar to yours. And the fact that you get to see that, once a week and make that part of your routine is awesome. Not a lot of people get to see it on that side and go through both things for long periods of time. So, yeah, I've never really struggled with love in general. It's just been interesting to be more aware of how I can continue to work on loving myself, because in turn, the people around me will be affected by that. You know, if I'm in a good place with my head and my heart, then the other people are going to be affected in a good way around me.
Yeah, the collateral, right? The infectious part about it, doing for me does for you, right? And
Yeah.
that's the important factor we got to factor in here. Is like sometimes when we're doing that monotonous work and it seems kind of grueling, and it's not always just for you, right? And it's like we can be beneficial to others, and it's why a lot of people, it's like that don't leave before the miracle, right?
Hmm.
It's because you haven't had a chance to see it develop in your life. You haven't had a chance to see somebody else like get it together. And when you see that, and it's just like when I see um some of my friends that I've helped in early recovery, and I mean, like I said, the odds aren't very high, and just to see one of them make it, and it's just like it's super cool to see their posts. And a good friend of mine with they just got married, and it's just super cool to see somebody still on the right path. And just knowing that I had a part of that in a small way, right? Well, at the time it was a big way, but it was just kind of cool, right? Because before it was just like everything I did was just, oh, look at me, and look how I could look at me, right? But just to be like, do some selfless acts, and I'm sure ego was involved somewhere, but I do my best when I'm doing my service work, whether sponsorship is just to try to do prayers along the way to keep my ego out of it, because ego's on the shoulder. It's that devil and angel on the shoulder analogy, right? There's a lot of things that can go awry at once. So you just got to watch what you're listening to, and feed yourself some of that positivity as you go along, and pray for the strength to keep your ego out of it. But turning back to that whole love factor, is just that's what I love seeing, is watching people live their own life, and being helped from that vulnerable place. And um, even if you just do one person, right, it's a really cool feeling.
What you said when you were just a moment ago about, the me, look what I'm doing, reminds me of a lot of people and even myself, kind of in the not early recovery, but kind of in this weird in between phase
Mm,
where you almost feel like you're better than others, even though you guys are all coming from the same place.
yeah.
And for anybody who's listening, be mindful of how you act and how you behave and how that relates to others, because in all honesty, we don't know what the person next to you, in front of you, behind you, around you has gone through, what they're going through, unless you physically ask. And if you're not in a position to say, "Hey, what's going on?" Try to practice that love, that empathy and kindness, and just pause and step out of that ego, because even though you are probably doing good things and being of service and things like that, don't let it get the better of you, because then you're going to end up creating a negative experience, and that's not the goal. But that's what
So
that made me think of when.
so you know what? I just had a conversation today right at work, and I won't go too far into it, but you know, it's like I was talking to this person, and there was some corrections needed, and yada yada yada, and I just turned to them and said, you know what? I don't expect you to not make mistakes. Right? That's not this whole game. We're human. We're mistake ridden. That's how we learn. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna make a million of them a day, right? There's this whole picture of our perfection is just out the window, right? And just going back on how you treat people is so important, right? There was a situation in Auburn back when my first time in recovery, and I was really working on trying to do the positivity, and bring some good in my life. And this guy came in. He seemed pretty down, and I shot the shit with him, and it kind of helped him brighten up. And a few weeks later, he comes back in and he thanks me, right? And I remember him, and he thanks me, and he flat out says, "Man, I was going through some pretty hard shit, right? I was thinking suicidal thoughts." right? And he didn't go too far into. He shook my hand and said thank you, and I remember that to this day. And I don't believe I've ever seen him since, but it just brings it highlights importance of how you treat even just a common stranger on the streets or at your work. It's like, if you think it doesn't matter, you need to recalibrate those thoughts, because yeah, we're human, we'll make mistakes and we have bad days, don't get me wrong, right? But we, to stay in that state of understanding that, other people are going through it too, right? So you might have a bad day, but somebody for sure has it worse. I can
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you that no matter how bad you've gone, there's somebody out there that has it worse, right? And just to be aware of that and to right size yourself is so important. And I think that's directly correlated with love, right? To do all these things that we like, discipline is complete love, right, for yourself. And a lot of people, I know I fell short for that for years, right? I know that every time I didn't show up for myself where I knew I needed to show up and imply the discipline, right? I realized that discipline is self-love, right? Every time I show up for myself, whether it be physically, mentally, all that stuff, all these disciplines, all these structures that I built for myself, that I stay disciplined to, like, that's self-love, right? And I urge anybody out there that's struggling with maybe discipline, or self-love or self-talk, all these things that are correlated, right? Just, give yourself a break, take it easy, and just, if you slip up, try again. That reset button is so important, right? So let's move on from love and let's talk about anger. Everything inside me is like, fuck that. I ain't talking shit about anger. Sorry for any
It's
virgin
funny.
ears out there.
You probably won't shut up this entire time. Like, Frank, 20 minutes of anger. Again,
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah, I will give a little bit of backstory. 3 to 4 times of mandated from the courts anger management, whether it was regular therapy, anger management, or the 52-week batter treatment, because I was always abusive to every woman that I was with, right? And I just say that because it's the truth. I don't say it in any type of egotistical way. That's, there's no pride that I take,
No gold
and
star.
yeah, that's not a gold star. It's fucking weak, right? And those are those realizations that I've had to make along this path, right? I thought, well, I always thought this. Well, I'll beat up men, women, and I thought that was tough. Like, it was a sickness that I had to overcome, right? And I'm just here to talk about real, right? The reality is that was my mindset, right? And I lived with that for very long, and I did some pretty heinous shit to people around me, whether it was ex-girlfriends, whether it was best friends, no matter what it was. I was always full of anger and ready to hurt somebody, and also ready to be hurt, right? There was no end to the madness when it came down to it. And so, that being said, in getting into this perpetual cycle of getting locked up, and going through the cycle of the pit bull mentality inside jail and in prison, right? There's this. I'm not tough by all means, but I've been through a lot of. I've been through a lot of very violent situations, right? And I'm glad I came out relatively unscathed, but a lot of the pain that I caused on some of the people that at one time I held in high regard, and I claimed that I loved them, and I cared for them, and just trying to recenter that and refocus that and change that has been quite the task, right? I've been through a lot of therapeutic environments, and I fell short many times. And today, though, I can say that I've done really well about figuring out this whole angle, right, or this anger thing, and just trying to do my best, because it's still gonna pop up, right? But anger is one thing, but acting on the angers just turns into violence, right? And that's what it, because everybody can be angry, right? But I was the type of person that would take it to that next level and make a bad situation worse. And how whatever the outcome, it's like either the cops are getting called or everybody is afraid, right? And getting to that place of where you accept God into your life and this whole recovery, there's just no place for it, right? There's no place where I could live the life that I want to live and attract the things I want to attract and keep the things I have currently in my life and also be as angry as I once was in the past, right? And it's a shedding process, right? There's a whole lot of things that need to be shed during this whole thing, right? And step by step, I've had to look at the Frank, right? The Frank, all the hurt, the inner child, the little Frank, the things that I've been avoiding, right? And that's what some of this step work has lean put the spotlight on, right? And getting to that place where we could let go, and that's a hard one, right? It's just like that analogy, that meme where it shows somebody holding a rope and showing the pain and pressure it takes and the harm it's doing to your hand as opposed to letting it go. It's and then all of a sudden you're free of it, and that's the mentality, right? And trying to, getting bogged down by all that tension and anger, right? It really subdues the spirit. And, in the most metaphorical sense of those wings that need to kind of lighten up. And so you can actually get into that flow state. Because if you're not, allowing yourself to be opened up and at least energetically and spiritually, you're going to be really closed off in so many ways, right? And you're not going to be open to what the spirit has in store for you, and you're going to be blocking out the blessings whether you realize it or not. Because, going back to that mind and spirit as a magnet, it's like you're if you're going to be in that state, you're going to be fucking up God's plan, right? And for me, even though I was so angry for so long, I realized that that was God's plan. Even how bad it was, it's like it led me towards to where I'm at today. And today, I'm doing a lot better. What do you got to say?
I didn't know if you wanted to go over the definition of anger at all.
Okay, yeah, do that.
So, anger is a natural human emotion involving strong displeasure, hostility, and agitation, ranging from mild irritation to intense rage. In recovery, it often serves as a signpost for underlying issues like unaddressed trauma, stress, or feelings of injustice that may have contributed to substance abuse. Learning to understand, manage, and healthily express anger is crucial for preventing relapse and supporting long term emotional well being during recovery.
Ah, all right. Well, we got little Rhea that just entered the picture. She was napping, and she actually woke up and wasn't angry, so that's a good sign. So, the let me look at that. You want to add anything to the whole shindig? There it is. Stand by.
What I like is that it talks about that anger comes from a place of trauma, and usually there's a reason, and it's a signpost for potential healing, a signal, a need for healing. If you're angry and very upset about something, especially to something that may seem so small, if you're that angry and worked up about it, it's important to, if possible, stop, pause, and kind of reflect as to why you're feeling that way. What's the circumstance? What's going on? And when you're in the middle of it, that's extremely hard to do. But the fact is that it's achievable. It will just take practice. And I just, I really like that because it helps me center myself and figure out what's going on, because a lot of the time it has nothing to do with what I'm angry at. There's something else behind it, underlying it. There's an intention there, and I've been able to better recognize that. And my anger is different than a lot of people's, yours per se, where I'm not necessarily violent, but more passive aggressive. and I can be very cold and brass and sassy in a sort of way, and then create another problem for myself. And I'm not as bad anymore. I'm able to pause, and that's been my most important tool for so many things in recovery, is to stop and think and not react. I'm learning how to respond.
Yeah, that reaction piece is such a difficult one, right?
It's a trigger.
Yeah, once you get triggered, it's like all logic flies out the window, and that bodily that bodily reaction, or like almost something like when the doctor hits your knee with that little tool, and and it's almost like
The reflex.
yeah, the whole reflex factor. It's such a crazy thing, is because some of this stuff that we're talking about, you're right. It that definition hits right on the. It's totally wrapped up in, the conversation, the narrative with yourself, the
Mm-hmm.
trauma, all that stuff that most of us are still carrying around, right? Whether it's on the forefront of our mind, it definitely makes it it does the thing behind the veil, if that makes sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
pulling the curtains, it's pulling the strings, it's controlling the lights. It's like that metaphor that we talk about in AA, trying to be the god and run the whole show. It's right. That's literally what my mind envisions it, right? And getting to that to the pressure points of change is a very hard thing to get to, because when you're living in such a reactive state, and you live almost like in your whatever they call it, the reptilian brain, where you're just like fight or flight constantly, right? So either on one hand you're running, and one hand you're fighting, and both are, if not equally, destructive. Because most of what I thought, well, I'm standing up and I'm facing it head on, but I caused so much destruction along the way. But then anytime I would avoid, it caused just as much destruction. It'd take a little longer, but eventually it would be knocking on your door, because it's the same difference. If something's left unkept and not managed, eventually it breaks down and you end up on the side of the road, metaphorically, right?
Well, the good
And
news is that it's, like I said in the beginning, it's a natural human
mhm,
emotion. So it's something that's going to come up again and again and again, and it's never going to go away.
yeah.
It's how you move through it and make those changes each time, and it's different for everybody.
When you talk about it also in a management situation, like I've recently experienced it, it's just like, dealing with different personalities, and when they get angry at each other, it's just like, I have to play conflict resolution, and that's so new for me. I mean, we're talking about somebody that would just punch you in the face for no fucking reason at
Sorry, I shouldn't
all.
laugh.
I know it, because it is funny. And I don't, and there's nothing that, all that was insecurity when I did that
Mm-hmm.
crap, right? It was all insecurity. So get coming from a place in such polar opposite. Now today I'm doing conflict resolution and making sure everything runs smoothly. And that's some of the gifts in recovery that you encounter, right? Understanding that although this pisses me off, I don't have to blow up the situation, and I can be, the guiding light in it all, right? As opposed to the destructive doom and darkness that used to constantly,
You
eh,
can facilitate
yeah,
resolution.
it's
People that are angry, they you can't do that. It's not
yeah,
possible when you're in the middle of that rage, that intense emotion. You it's not possible.
yeah.
Not for anything that's conducive.
The biggest thing that really helped me with my anger is you have to invite God or a higher power into your life, some form of spirituality that is going to bring your vibration and your soul
Mm.
to a higher spot. Because most of this that we're facing, right, in step one, two, and three, they're all God steps, right?
Letting go.
The letting go process, and allowing something else, a power other than yourself and also greater than you, then getting to this point where you could actually release some of that and understand, because you have no control, you're powerless, right? And that's what anger does. It's a complete crutch, thinking that you can regain control of some sort of thing, right? And that's the one thing that I struggle with, right? Is that's why anger pops up to me, because it was a tool where I can put it, okay, it's getting out of hand and I'm going to control it, right?
You know what's interesting is that you can control. So, you give your will your life and you want to change and you give that power up. At the same time, we can only control ourselves and our actions. And by getting better at this whole thing, you can control your anger in a positive way.
Yeah.
It's a
You know,
double-edged sword in some circumstances.
well, controlling, the self control, right? Because that's all that's realistic when we talk about control is self control, right? There's no controlling other people, right? There's only controlling what you do and
Mm-hmm.
how you behave and how you perceive and how you interact, all these things, right? And a lot of people, when they come into recovery, I really thought that I didn't have control over some of those things. Like, all these things that I had to do was like it was necessary. Well, you disrespected me. Well, I'm gonna have to handle business. This is your fault. That's kind of not taking accountability
Uh-huh.
for my own faculties. Like, it's like, well, there I go again, punching you in the head. What did you make me do?
And then
Right?
it's their fault, not yours.
Yeah, and it's a total
Going in the
psychopath
hole.
way. Yeah, exactly. And you know the reset from that is so extreme, and there's a lot of turbulence along the way, because what happens when you get angry and when you're an angry person, the process through it makes you angry, right? And it's such a trippy experience getting to that other side, because you're going to bump your head, you're going to have to invite God in the situation, you're going to have to do inventory, you're going to have to look at your character defects, you're going to have to ask character defects. You're going to have to add a higher power to that to relieve you of them. You're going to have to make the list. You're going to have to do the amends, and you're going to have to constantly check your motives and constantly constantly make up for what you do day to day, constantly doing that, right? And then constant contact with God, and then service. And it just rinse and repeat. And that whole cycle is so it's really cleansing, right? And it kind of baffles me that I never found it sooner. It's like, all the drugs that I did and all the alcohol I drank, and I didn't really, I mean, I was forced to go to meetings, but I never really wanted to be there, and I'd be in there claiming clean time when I was like super high on methadone, nodding out, or I'd be high on
A lot
I
of people don't go into those meeting those because they want to.
yeah, no, it's never,
At least
the,
not in the beginning.
the craziest psych, like, shooting up drugs before you go in there, and then your buddy is just hold the whole meeting hostage for like 20 or 30 minutes, and people are like, he's like giving me credit, this, if it wasn't for my friend. Little did the people know there that I shot him up with drugs for his first time, and I'm soaking it in, like, these people think I'm a great person. But that's the kind of drug addict I was for many years. Like, it was almost like I was living in this ego trip of like, come on, dude. Like, if they really knew, and they knew we were both high, but in my brain built it up like, yeah, I'm the supportive friend, and I got his back, and thank God I'm here. And the whole thing was a fallacy, and that was most of my using life and most of my recovery experience, or lack thereof, if you want to call it that, right? And so if you're out there, you're struggling with going in and out of the rooms, you're struggling with anger. I believe anger is at the cornerstone of most of what we're dealing with, right? Um, everything that I've kind of fell into I fell into those situations due to my intense anger, right? And what did she go do?
Just don't worry about it.
We
For me,
got
so anger, one thing I want to mention before we get off is, for me, what I notice when my anger is triggered, it's usually because of my expectations, and I think that's important that we should bring up to people that are listening
mm,
is your expectations. Usually, in my experience, if I get mad, it's because something didn't happen the way that I wanted to. You get again, kind of go back into that control part of it.
Mm,
But what I've learned to do in those situations is to either have no expectations, which is not a reality, but is to approach situations with a more open mind and recognize that people aren't going to do what I want them to do. And being realistic of that has been a game changer for
yeah.
me.
Yeah, expectations are tough, right? Because I like to see it more as like if you have a game plan and you've planned it out A, B, C, and you've done your work, you've done your homework, you've done the self work, right? You got to a point where you're emotionally intelligent to handle some of these things, right? There's a big reason why we stay out of big decisions in our first years because we're
We
not
don't know how to
mentally and
deal with them.
spiritually. Yeah, we just don't know what the hell we're doing. What makes you think we need to add another person into that mess, right? So if you're out there, I'm not telling anybody how to live their life. I'm just saying it's going to be more complicated. The more factors you add into your early recovery, the more difficult it gets,
Keep it
right?
simple.
The more you add, the more that you deal with, right? So it's super important you keep it simple, especially in the beginning. So if you're out there, you're struggling, and anger is a problem for you. Um, let's work on it this week, right? We could hear our crazy daughter in the background, and it
She's so
sounds like
cute.
she wants in on the podcast. She only
Is she
knows a
playing at
few
the monster
words,
truck?
and her current addiction is milk. So
Baba.
bye bye.
Baba.
So this is FD Recovery. Did you want to add anything on here about anger? Because it's
I
starting to
think you
piss me
covered
off.
that whole 20 minutes of your backstory like I talked about, so we're good.
Yeah, the TED Talk of anger. This podcast has really pissed me off. All right, you guys out there, we'll be working on anger this week.
Frank will definitely be working on his
Oh
anger this
yeah,
week.
yeah. There's no doubt about it. I deal with it constantly, so I'm constantly
I don't know
working
why
on
I'm
it.
perfect.
Oh yeah, of
You've no
course.
reason to be angry
Yeah.
with me ever.
No, why would I? It's crazy. I'm only angry at myself.
See,
Beat.
you guys heard it.
Ding, ding,
Witness.
ding. We're sorry. The number cannot be reached. All right, guys. Work on anger this week. This is FD Recovery. And goodbye.
You say bye?
Say bye bye.
Bye.
Say bye bye.
I said bye. No.
Later.
No, bye bye.
Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to FD Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor, get connected to local support groups, and for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.